She tried to poison her own sister for the business, but her victim rose from the dead to expose her. Picture this. St. Mary's Hospital, room 314. The machines are beeping steadily, and there I am, supposedly dying in that sterile white bed, surrounded by the soft hum of medical equipment. My sister Lena sits beside me, her perfectly manicured fingers dabbing at crocodile tears with a tissue that costs more than most people's weekly groceries. She's been like this for 3 days, Lena whispers to the nurse, her voice cracking with what anyone else would mistake for genuine grief. The doctors say. They say there might not be much time left. The nurse, Carmen, though Lena doesn't know we've been friends since college, nods sympathetically. I'm so sorry. This must be incredibly difficult for you. It is, Lena says, and for a moment, I almost believe her myself. Isadora was. She was everything to me. My business partner, my best friend, my only family. But then Carmen steps closer, clipboard in hand, and asks the question we've been waiting for. Ma'am, I need to ask, do you have any idea what might have caused this sudden collapse? The toxicology reports are unusual. That's when it happens. Lena's mask slips for just a fraction of a second. Her eyes dart toward the door, then back to my supposedly unconscious form. She thinks she's safe. She thinks I can't hear her. No, I have no idea, she says. But her voice wavers. Isadora's always been so health conscious. She barely drinks, doesn't smoke. This came out of nowhere. Carmen writes something down, then looks up. The reason I ask is because we found traces of a rare compound in her system, something called tetrodotoxin. It's not something you'd encounter accidentally. I watch through barely cracked eyelids as Lena goes rigid. Tetrodotoxin, the poison she thought was untraceable, the one she researched for months before deciding it was perfect for her little scheme. That's terrible, Lena manages. Someone tried to murder my sister. But Carmen's not done. She steps closer, and I can see the small recording device clipped to her uniform. One of 6 we've placed throughout this room over the past 3 days. Miss Velez? Carmen says quietly. We've been recording all conversations in this room as part of our investigation. Would you like to explain why your fingerprints are on the wine glass that contained the poison? The color drains from Lena's face so fast I'm worried she might actually faint. But before she can respond, Carmen continues. Or perhaps you'd like to explain this? She holds up her phone, and on the screen is security footage from our company gala 3 nights ago. Crystal clear video of Lena slipping something into my champagne glass when she thought no one was looking. But here's the thing, Lena, Carmen says, and that's when I finally sit up in bed, very much alive and very much ready for this moment. Your sister never drank from that glass. Lena spins around, and the look on her face, pure, undiluted, terror mixed with disbelief, is worth every uncomfortable hour I've spent in this hospital bed. Hello, baby sister, I say, my voice steady and calm. How's that taste? Poisonous enough for you? But before I show you how I served her the most delicious revenge, let me take you back to where it all began. Welcome to Revenge Treats. I'm Isadora Velez, and this is the story of how my baby sister tried to erase me, and how I rose from the dead to ruin her life. For 36 years, I believed in the power of family. I believed that blood was thicker than water, that loyalty was sacred, and that the bond between sisters was unbreakable. I built my entire life around these beliefs, pouring everything I had into the business my parents started, and the relationship with the one person I thought I could trust above all others. The Velez Gourmet Empire wasn't just a company, it was our family's legacy. What started as our parents' small sauce-making operation in their garage had grown into a multi-million-dollar empire spanning luxury condiments, artisanal sauces, and 5 high-end restaurants across 3 states. When our parents died in a car accident 5 years ago, They left the business to Lena and me in equal shares, trusting that we would honor their vision and continue building something beautiful together. And for a while we did. I handled operations, supplier relationships and product development, the nuts and bolts that kept our empire running smoothly. Lena managed public relations, marketing, and the glamorous side of the business that looked so good on Instagram. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. I should have seen the signs earlier. The way Lena's smile never quite reached her eyes when investors praised my strategic thinking. How she'd bristle whenever suppliers mentioned that I was the one who really understood the technical side of our products. The subtle comments she'd make about how I was too intense or too controlling whenever I pushed for quality standards or questioned expenses. But I loved her. She was my baby sister, 4 years younger, and the only family I had left. When she'd joke about how I was the boring one and she was the fun one, I laughed along. When she'd roll her eyes at my attention to detail, I told myself it was just our different personalities balancing each other out. I was so naive. The first crack in our relationship started about 8 months ago, though I didn't recognize it at the time. We were in a board meeting with our investors, discussing expansion plans for the upcoming year. I had prepared a detailed presentation about entering the European market, complete with cost analyses, supplier research, and projected timelines. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking that's made Velez Gourmet so successful, said Richard Chen, our primary investor. Isadora, your strategic planning continues to impress. I smiled and thanked him, but I noticed Lena's jaw tighten. After the meeting, she cornered me in my office. You know, Isa, sometimes I feel like you're trying to make me look stupid in these meetings. What do you mean? I was genuinely confused. All these elaborate presentations, these detailed reports, it makes it look like I'm not pulling my weight. Lena, that's not what I'm trying to do at all. You handle the marketing brilliantly and... Do I? Because Richard never compliments my work the way he compliments yours. I tried to reassure her, to explain that we each brought different strengths to the company, but she was already shutting down. This became a pattern. Every success I had seemed to irritate her more. Every compliment I received felt like a personal attack on her worth. Then the whisper campaign started. It was subtle at first. Suppliers would mention in passing that Lena had expressed concerns about my workload and whether I was taking on too much. The board members would ask if I was feeling overwhelmed or if I needed to delegate more responsibility. Investors started questioning whether our leadership structure was sustainable. I couldn't figure out where these concerns were coming from until I overheard Lena on a phone call with Marcus Webb, one of our board members. I'm just worried about her, Marcus, she was saying, her voice full of fake concern. Isadora's been so stressed lately, making decisions without consulting anyone, staying at the office until all hours. Yesterday, she snapped at our head chef over a sauce recipe that's been successful for years. I think the pressure of running everything is getting to her. None of this was true. I had suggested one small modification to our signature sauce based on customer feedback, and I stayed late because I enjoyed perfecting our products. But Lena was painting a picture of someone on the verge of a breakdown. When I confronted her about it, she turned it around on me. See? This is exactly what I'm talking about, she said, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. You're so paranoid and defensive. Maybe you do need to step back and let me handle more of the day-to-day operations. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Over the next few months, Lena's campaign intensified. She started scheduling meetings with board members and investors without including me, claiming she was handling the interpersonal relationships to take pressure off me. She'd make unilateral decisions about marketing campaigns and public appearances, then claim she was protecting me from additional stress. The breaking point came 6 weeks ago during a strategy session about a potential merger with Harrison Foods, a major distributor that could triple our reach. I had been negotiating with their team for months, building relationships and working out the complex details of how our companies could integrate. Actually, Lena announced in the middle of the meeting, I think it would be best if I took over as the primary contact for this merger. Isadora's been so focused on the operational details that she might be missing the bigger picture. Richard Chen looked confused. But Isadora's the one who initiated this deal and has the established relationship with Harrison's team. Exactly, Lena said smoothly. And she's done wonderful work getting us to this point. But now we need someone who can focus on the strategic vision and the interpersonal dynamics. That's more my area of expertise. I watched in stunned silence as she systematically undermined months of my work, painting herself as the visionary leader and me as a detail-oriented worker who couldn't see the forest for the trees. By the end of the meeting, half the board was nodding along with her assessment. That night, I went home and did something I never thought I'd have to do. I started researching how to protect myself from corporate sabotage. What I learned terrified me. Lena had been following a textbook strategy for forcing out a business partner. Isolate them, undermine their credibility, make their removal seem like the logical solution to problems they never actually created. But I also learned something else. The best defense is often offense, and the most powerful weapon in corporate warfare is information. That's when I decided to start recording everything. Installing hidden cameras and recording devices in my own office felt like crossing a line I never wanted to cross, but Lena had forced my hand. I worked with a private security firm to place tiny cameras in strategic locations, behind picture frames, inside decorative plants, even built into the coffee maker that sat on the credenza behind my desk. I also started keeping detailed records of every conversation, every meeting, every decision that was made or unmade. I documented Lena's contradictory statements, her attempts to exclude me from important discussions, and her increasingly bold claims about my supposed incompetence. What I discovered over the next month was worse than I had imagined. On days when I wasn't in the office, Lena would hold impromptu meetings with staff, spreading rumors about my mental state and my ability to continue leading the company. She told our head chef that I was considering selling my shares and leaving the business. She told our accountant that I was making erratic financial decisions that could jeopardize our stability. None of it was true, but Lena was smart about it. She never put anything in writing, never made accusations directly, just raised concerns and asked leading questions that planted seeds of doubt. The most damaging conversation I recorded was between Lena and our lawyer, Janet Morrison, who had helped our family set up the company's legal structure years ago. "Janet, I need to ask you something in confidence," Lena said during what she thought was a private phone call. "If Isadora were to become incapacitated, what would happen to her shares in the company?" "Incapacitated how?" Janet asked, clearly confused. "Well, hypothetically, if she had some kind of mental health crisis or medical emergency that made her unable to fulfill her duties as co-owner." Janet explained that unless Isadora voluntarily signed over her shares or was declared legally incompetent by a court, her ownership stake would remain intact. Even if she were hospitalized or in a coma, her shares would be held in trust. But, Janet continued, if both co-owners agreed to restructure the company's leadership, that could be done relatively easily with the right paperwork. I could practically hear Lena's wheels turning through the recording. "And if one co-owner were to die?" she asked. "Then their shares would transfer according to their will, or, if there's no will, to their next of kin." "Which would be me," Lena said quietly. "Yes, as her only living relative, you would inherit everything." That conversation sent chills down my spine. But it also clarified something important. Lena wasn't just trying to push me out of the business. She was exploring every possible way to take complete control, including scenarios where I was no longer alive to object. I doubled down on my surveillance and started making plans of my own. The company gala was scheduled for the first Saturday in November, our annual celebration, where we announced new products, honored our best employees, and schmoozed with investors and industry partners. It was also the perfect opportunity for Lena to make her move, with hundreds of witnesses to see me suffer some kind of mysterious collapse. In the weeks leading up to the gala, I noticed Lena researching unusual topics on her laptop when she Thought I wasn't looking. Tropical fish diseases. Rare plant toxins. Undetectable poisons used in spy novels. She was always careful to clear her browser history, but she didn't know I had installed keylogger software that recorded every search, every website visit, every online purchase. That's how I learned about tetrodotoxin. It's a neurotoxin found in certain fish and octopi, almost impossible to detect without specific testing, and deadly in the right doses. In smaller amounts, it can cause paralysis, respiratory failure, and symptoms that mimic a heart attack or stroke. Lena had found a black market supplier who claimed the toxin was for research purposes only and had it shipped to a P.O. box she'd rented under a fake name. She was planning to kill me. The revelation was devastating, but it also gave me the opportunity I needed. If Lena wanted to play a game of life and death, I would play it better than she could imagine. I reached out to Carmen, my friend from college who now worked as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. I explained the situation and asked for her help, with what I knew sounded like an insane plan. To her credit, she didn't hesitate. "If your sister is trying to poison you," Carmen said, "then we need to make sure she faces consequences. Count me in." Together, we planned my fake death down to the smallest detail. Carmen would be working the night shift when I was brought in. She would handle my initial assessment and make sure I was placed in a private room with maximum security access. She would also coordinate with Dr. Martinez, a friend of hers who specialized in toxicology, and was willing to help us document everything for the eventual legal case. The night of the gala, I was ready. The Velez Gourmet Annual Gala was held at the Grand Ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, the same venue where our parents had celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Lena had insisted on handling all the arrangements, and I had to admit she'd done a beautiful job. The room was decorated with elegant displays of our products, soft lighting that made everything look like a magazine spread, and enough champagne to float a small yacht. I wore a black cocktail dress that I'd had tailored specifically for the evening, with a small pocket sewn into the lining where I could hide a tiny recording device. Every conversation would be captured, every interaction documented. Lena looked stunning in a deep red gown that complemented her dark hair perfectly. She worked the room like the consummate hostess, charming investors and making everyone feel like the most important person at the party. If I hadn't known what she was planning, I would have been proud of how professionally she handled everything. "Isa," she called out when she spotted me near the champagne fountain. "You look gorgeous. Are you having fun?" "It's a beautiful party," I said, watching her carefully. "You've outdone yourself." "I just want everything to be perfect for us," she said, and the way she emphasized us made my skin crawl. "Here, let me get you some champagne. Dom Perignon, your favorite." She walked to the bar and returned with 2 flutes of golden champagne. I watched her approach, noting how she held one glass slightly differently than the other, how her grip on the stem was more careful and controlled. "To the Velez sisters," she said, raising her glass, "and to the future of our company." "To family," I replied, but I didn't drink yet. Instead, I waited. I engaged in small talk, introduced her to a supplier she hadn't met, and gradually maneuvered us toward the corner of the room where I knew the lighting was perfect for the hidden camera I'd placed in my clutch purse. "You know what?" I said finally. "I want to make a proper toast, just us sisters, before we get pulled into more business conversations." Lena's eyes lit up. This was exactly what she wanted. A private moment where she could watch me drink, the poisoned champagne without any interference. "That sounds perfect," she said. I raised my glass and clinked it gently against hers. "Lena, whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that I love you. You're my baby sister, and that will never change." For just a moment, she looked genuinely emotional. Maybe she was having second thoughts. Maybe she was remembering when we were kids and actually cared about each other. But then she said, "I love you too, Isa. Now drink up. We have a party to host." That's when I made my move. As I brought the glass to my lips, I pretended to stumble slightly, bumping into Lena and causing both of us to lower our glasses for a second. In that brief moment of confusion, I switched them. It was a move I'd practiced dozens of times over the past week, using glasses filled with water in my kitchen until I could do it smoothly and naturally. Lena never noticed. I took a long sip of what was now her champagne, the one that hadn't been poisoned. She took a smaller sip of what had been my glass, the one laced with tetrodotoxin, and then I waited. It took about 20 minutes for the effects to start, which was exactly what I'd expected based on my research. I began with subtle signs. A slight tremor in my hand, a moment where I seemed to lose my balance and had to steady myself against a table. "Are you okay?" asked Margaret Harrison, the CEO of Harrison Foods, who had been discussing the merger. Details with me. "I'm fine," I said. "Just a little dizzy. Maybe I should sit down for a minute." Lena appeared at my side immediately, playing the concerned sister perfectly. "Isa, you look pale. Maybe you should get some fresh air." "No, I'm okay," I insisted, but I let my voice sound slightly slurred. Just need a minute." Over the next 10 minutes, I escalated the symptoms gradually. More obvious balance problems, difficulty speaking clearly, a moment where I seemed to lose consciousness briefly before snapping back to awareness. The guests were starting to notice. Conversations were getting quieter as people turned to stare. Lena was getting more and more agitated, probably because the poison was taking longer to work than she'd expected. Finally, I made my move. I was standing near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by investors and industry partners, when I let my eyes roll back and collapse dramatically to the floor. I had practiced this fall to make it look genuine while avoiding any actual injury, landing on my side, arms positioned naturally, breathing shallow but steady. The room erupted in chaos. "Call 911!" someone shouted. "Is there a doctor here?" Lena cried out, kneeling beside me and cradling my head in her lap. "Please, someone help her." I remained completely limp, unresponsive to voices or touch. Through barely cracked eyelids, I watched Lena's performance. She was crying real tears now, but I couldn't tell if they were from genuine fear or from the stress of watching her plan unfold. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Carmen had been standing by at the hospital, and she'd made sure the ambulance crew knew to expect a potential poisoning case. They loaded me onto a stretcher with the proper precautions for toxin exposure, and Lena rode with me to the hospital, holding my hand and whispering reassurances that I was going to be okay. If I hadn't known she was the one who had caused this, her concern might have been touching. The next 3 days were the most challenging performance of my life. Lying motionless in a hospital bed, connected to monitors and IV lines, while maintaining the illusion of being in a toxin-induced coma, required every ounce of mental discipline I possessed. Carmen was brilliant. She handled my care personally, adjusting medications and monitoring my condition, while actually keeping me comfortable and safe. Dr. Martinez ran the toxicology tests that would later serve as evidence, documenting the presence of tetrodotoxin in my system, while secretly recording everything Lena said and did during her visits. And oh, the things Lena said. The first day, she maintained her act even when she thought I was unconscious. She sat beside my bed reading magazines and talking about office gossip, occasionally taking calls from worried employees and board members. "No, there's been no change," she would say. "The doctors are still running tests. They think it might have been some kind of allergic reaction, but they're not sure to what." But by the second day, her facade was starting to crack. "You know, Isa," she said during one of her evening visits, "maybe this is for the best. You've been so stressed lately, so obsessed with controlling every little detail. Maybe your body is telling you it's time to step back." She paused, looking around the room to make sure no one was listening. "I've been thinking about what would happen if you don't wake up. The board has been asking questions about succession planning." Richard thinks it might be wise to have a single point of leadership during this crisis. I lay perfectly still, but inside I was seething. She was already planning to take over the company while I was supposedly fighting for my life. The third day was when she finally revealed her true self. I did some research, she said quietly, pulling her chair closer to my bed. Tetrodotoxin is fascinating stuff. Did you know it's almost impossible to detect unless you know specifically what to look for? And the symptoms mimic so many other conditions: heart problems, neurological disorders, even psychiatric issues. She reached out and stroked my hair, the gesture disturbingly gentle. The thing is, Issa, I never wanted it to come to this. I tried to do this the easy way. Tried to convince you to step aside voluntarily. But you're so stubborn, so convinced that you know better than everyone else. Her voice was getting harder, more bitter. Do you know what it's like being your sister? Always standing in your shadow, always being seen as the pretty one while you were the smart one? Even our parents did it. Remember how they used to introduce us? This is Isadora, our little genius, and this is Lena, our social butterfly. She stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights. I built the public face of this company. I'm the one who gets us into magazines, who charms the investors, who makes people want to be associated with our brand. But you get all the credit for being the real businesswoman. She turned back toward me, and I could see the hatred in her eyes even through my barely open lids. Well, not anymore. When you die, and you are going to die, the doctors just don't know it yet. I'll be the sole owner of Velez Gourmet. I'll expand the company beyond anything you ever imagined. I'll show everyone that I was the real visionary all along. She sat back down and leaned close to my ear. And the best part? Everyone will remember you as the tragic sister who worked herself to death. They'll say I tried to help you, tried to get you to slow down. But you were too proud to listen. Your death will actually make me more sympathetic, more respected. Then she did something that almost made me break character. She slipped my grandmother's ring off my finger, a family heirloom that had been passed down through 3 generations. I think I'll wear this to your funeral, she said, sliding it onto her own finger. It'll be a touching tribute to family tradition. That was the moment I knew she had sealed her own fate. On the 4th day, Carmen initiated the final phase of our plan. She came into my room during Lena's morning visit, looking concerned and excited. Miss Velez, she said to Lena, I think you should know. We've been seeing some unusual brain activity in your sister's scans. Dr. Martinez thinks she might be starting to regain consciousness. Lena went pale. What does that mean? Well, it's too early to tell for sure, but her body might be processing the toxin more effectively than we expected. There's a chance she could wake up. I watched through barely cracked eyes as Lena processed this information. She excused herself to make some phone calls, probably trying to figure out if there was a way to ensure I stayed unconscious permanently. When she returned an hour later, Carmen was waiting with news that I knew would terrify her. Miss Velez, we need to discuss something important. The police want to speak with you about your sister's condition. The police? Lena's voice cracked slightly. Yes, ma'am. When someone is hospitalized with poisoning, especially with a toxin as rare as tetrodotoxin, it triggers an automatic investigation. They need to interview everyone who was with your sister before she collapsed. Carmen pulled out a clipboard and pen. I need to ask you some questions for their report. First, were you aware that your sister had any enemies? Anyone who might want to harm her? No, Lena said quickly. Everyone loved Isadora. She was a wonderful person. And you were with her at the gala all evening? You didn't notice anyone giving her food or drinks? Well, there were so many people there. I was busy hosting, making sure everyone was having a good time. Carmen nodded sympathetically. Of course, it must have been overwhelming. But you didn't see anyone approach her with anything suspicious? No, nothing like that. What about earlier in the evening? Did you and your sister share any drinks or appetizers? Lena hesitated. We had champagne together. A toast. But that was from the bar and other people were drinking the same. Champagne with no problems. I see. Carmen made a note. The investigators will want to test the glassware from the event. See if they can trace how the poison was administered. I could see sweat beading on Lena's forehead. Actually, Carmen continued, there's something else. We found your fingerprints on a glass that tested positive for tetrodotoxin residue. Lena's face went completely white. That's impossible. Ma'am, is there anything you'd like to tell me? Sometimes family members accidentally come into contact with dangerous substances, or someone might try to frame. I need to call my lawyer, Lena said abruptly. Of course, Carmen said calmly. But before you go, there's something your sister wanted me to show you. That was my cue. I opened my eyes fully and sat up in bed, looking directly at Lena for the first time in 4 days. Her scream was so loud that it brought 2 other nurses running. Hello, baby sister, I said, my voice clear and strong. How's that taste? Poisonous enough for you? Lena stumbled backward, knocking over her chair and clutching at the wall for support. You're supposed to be dead? I finished. Sorry to disappoint you. Carmen stepped forward with her phone in hand. Everything you've said in this room over the past 4 days has been recorded. Every confession, every admission, every detail about how you plan to take over the company. That's not... I never... Lena was hyperventilating now, looking around the room like a trapped animal. You never what? I asked, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. Never researched tetrodotoxin? Never bought it from a black market supplier? Never slipped it into my champagne glass at the gala? I stood up, and despite 4 days of lying in bed, I felt strong and steady. Righteous anger has a way of energizing you. Or maybe you never told my unconscious body that you were glad I was dying, that you planned to wear our grandmother's ring to my funeral, that everyone would remember me as the sister who worked herself to death. Lena's eyes darted to her hand, where our grandmother's ring still sat on her finger. She tried to pull it off, but her hands were shaking too badly. Isa, please, you have to understand. I understand perfectly, I cut her off. I understand that you spent months systematically undermining me with our board and investors. I understand that you researched ways to have me declared incompetent or dead so you could steal my half of the company. And I understand that when those methods seemed too slow, you decided to poison me. Carmen was standing by the door, and I could see 2 police officers approaching down the hallway. Everything was happening exactly as we had planned. The thing is, Lena, I continued, I've been recording you too. Every lie you told about my mental state, every meeting you held behind my back, every conversation where you plotted to destroy me. I walked closer to her, and she pressed herself against the wall as if she could disappear into it. You made one critical mistake in all of this. You assumed I was too trusting, too naive, too focused on the business to notice what you were doing. But I'm not the same person who used to cover for you when you made mistakes, or who believed your excuses when you forgot important meetings. The police officers entered the room, and Carmen handed them a folder thick with documentation. Officers, she said, this is Lena Velez. She's wanted for the attempted murder of her sister. As they read Lena her rights, she looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, undiluted hatred mixed with disbelief that her plan had failed so completely. You always thought you were so much smarter than me, she hissed as they put the handcuffs on her wrists. This isn't over, Isa. I'll fight this. I'll prove that you're lying. I smiled at her, and I knew it wasn't a kind smile. Good luck with that, I said. But you might want to save your energy for your trial. I hear tetrodotoxin possession carries a pretty hefty sentence, even before we get to the attempted murder charge. As they led her away, she turned back one last time. "I'm your sister," she screamed. "I'm your only family." "No," I said quietly. "A sister wouldn't try to poison me. You're just someone who happened to share my DNA." The door closed behind them, and for the first time in months, I could finally breathe freely. The media frenzy around Lena's arrest was intense but brief. "Sister tries to poison sister for family business" was the kind of headline that generated clicks and views. But the story itself was too complex for most outlets to cover in depth. They focused on the sensational aspects: the fake death, the recorded confessions, the family business worth millions, while missing the deeper story of systematic manipulation and betrayal. The legal proceedings took 8 months. Lena's lawyer tried several different strategies, from claiming temporary insanity to arguing that I had entrapped her by faking my death. None of them worked. The evidence was overwhelming. Her internet searches for poison, the black market, purchase, the security footage from the gala, and hours of recorded confessions. She was eventually sentenced to 12 years in prison for attempted murder, corporate fraud, and conspiracy. The judge called it one of the most calculated and cold-blooded attempts at fratricide he had ever encountered. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. By that point, I had moved on to rebuilding my life and my business. With Lena out of the picture, I had to restructure the entire company. The board of directors, embarrassed by how easily they had been manipulated, gave me complete autonomy to make whatever changes I deemed necessary. Some of them offered to resign, but I kept the ones who had been genuinely deceived and let go the ones who had been actively working with Lena against me. The first thing I did was rename the company. Velez Gourmet became Velez and Valor, a nod to the courage it had taken to expose my sister's betrayal and rebuild from the ashes of her sabotage. I also made personnel changes that I had been wanting to implement for years, but had been blocked from doing because of Lena's objections. I promoted Carmen from her hospital job to head of corporate security. Her background in healthcare and her loyalty during my darkest hour made her perfect for protecting the company from future threats. Marcus Chen, the son of our primary investor, had always been interested in the operational side of the business, but had been dismissed by Lena as too nerdy for our glamorous image. I brought him in as chief operating officer, and his fresh perspective helped us streamline processes and identify new opportunities. Most importantly, I hired Dr. Sarah Rodriguez as head of product development. Sarah had been working for one of our competitors, developing innovative preservation techniques that could extend the shelf life of gourmet products without compromising taste. Lena had always refused to consider poaching her because she was too expensive. But Sarah's expertise was exactly what we needed to enter new markets. The business flourished under this new leadership structure. Without Lena's constant interference and her focus on style over substance, we were able to make decisions based purely on what was best for the company and our customers. Within 6 months, we had secured the Harrison Foods merger that Lena had tried to sabotage, expanding our distribution network across the entire East Coast. Sarah's innovations allowed us to launch a line of premium sauces with extended shelf life, perfect for international shipping. We opened 2 new restaurants and began franchising opportunities in major metropolitan areas. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was personal. 1 year after Lena's arrest, Velez and Valor hosted our first annual gala under the new name. The venue was the same grand ballroom at the Meridian Hotel, but everything else was different. Instead of Lena's flashy decorations and superficial networking, we created an event focused on celebrating our employees, our products, and our genuine achievements. The guest list included everyone who had supported me during the investigation, as well as industry partners who had distanced themselves from the company during the scandal, but were now eager to be associated with our success. Carmen was there in a beautiful navy dress, laughing with Dr. Martinez about their amateur detective work. Marcus Chen brought his entire family, proud to show off the company he was helping to build. But the highlight of the evening was the dessert course. Working with our pastry chef, I had designed a special treat just for this occasion. Individual, poison apple tartlets, complete with glossy red glazes and tiny decorative skulls made from white chocolate. They were displayed on elegant black plates with cards that read, "Some apples are meant to reveal the truth." The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. These beautiful, harmless desserts were the perfect metaphor for how appearances can be deceiving, and how sometimes the things that look most dangerous are actually the most enlightening. As I watched our guests bite into these poisonous treats and smile with delight at the perfect balance of tart apple and sweet custard, I felt a satisfaction, deeper than any business success could provide. I had turned the weapon that was meant to destroy me into a symbol of my triumph. The speech I gave that night was nothing like the formal business presentations I used to deliver. Instead, I spoke from the heart about betrayal and resilience, about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who truly want to see you succeed. A year ago, I told the assembled crowd, someone very close to me tried to convince the world that I was weak, unstable, and unfit to lead this company. They nearly succeeded, not through superior business acumen, but through lies, manipulation, and ultimately, attempted murder. The room was completely silent. Everyone knew the Yasai story, but hearing me speak about it so directly was still powerful. But here's what I learned from that experience. True strength isn't about avoiding betrayal or protecting yourself from people who might hurt you. True strength is about rising above the damage they inflict and building something better than what existed before. I raised my glass of champagne, the same brand Lena had used to try to poison me, though now it held only Dom Perignon and the promise of better things to come. So tonight, I want to toast not just to Velez and Valor's success, but to everyone who stood by me when it would have been easier to walk away. To the employees who continued doing excellent work despite uncertainty about the company's future. To the investors who maintained their faith in our vision. And to the friends who helped me expose the truth when the stakes couldn't have been higher. The applause was thunderous, but more than that, it was genuine. These people weren't clapping because they felt obligated to. They were celebrating because they had witnessed something extraordinary and been part of it. After the dinner, Carmen pulled me aside. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Really feel?" I considered the question carefully. "It feels like justice," I said finally. Not revenge exactly, because I didn't set out to destroy Lena. I just refused to let her destroy me. Everything that happened to her was a consequence of her own choices. Carmen nodded. She could have had everything. A successful business, a loving sister, respect in the industry. Instead, she chose jealousy and greed. "The tragedy," I said, "is that there was room for both of us to succeed. The company was big enough, profitable enough, growing fast enough that we both could have had fulfilling careers and built something amazing together. But she couldn't see past her own insecurities. 2 years have passed since that night, and Velez and Valor continues to grow. We now have 12 restaurants across 4 states, and our products are sold in premium grocery stores nationwide. The European expansion I had planned before Lena's sabotage is finally happening, with distribution deals in France, Italy, and the UK. More importantly, the company culture has completely transformed. Without the toxic dynamic that Lena created, our employees are more creative, more collaborative, and more committed to excellence. We've won several industry awards for both our products and our workplace environment. I still think about Lena, sometimes, especially when I'm making decisions that affect the direction of the company. I wonder if she follows our success from prison, if she regrets the choices that led her there, if she ever truly understands what she threw away. The last letter I received from her was 6 months ago. She wanted me to visit her, claimed she had things to explain, apologies to make. I read it twice and then threw it away. There was nothing she could say that would change what happened. and I had no interest in reopening old wounds just to satisfy her need for absolution. Some people might call that cold or unforgiving. They might say that family should mean something, that I should give her a chance to make amends. But they didn't live through months of systematic betrayal. They didn't have their own sister try to murder them for money. Family isn't about shared DNA. It's about loyalty, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. By that definition, Carmen is more my sister than Lena ever was. Marcus is more my brother. The employees who stayed with the company through the scandal are more my family than the person who tried to poison me. If I could go back and change, what happened, would I? That's a question I've wrestled with many times over the past few years. On one hand, the betrayal was devastating. It shattered my trust in people, forced me to become more suspicious and calculating, and cost me the only biological family I had left. But on the other hand, it revealed strengths I didn't know I possessed. It taught me to rely on my own judgment instead of automatically trusting people based on their relationship to me. It showed me who my real allies were and helped me build a stronger, more authentic business and personal life. Most importantly, it proved that you can survive even the most personal betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. The poison apple tartlets have become a signature dessert at all our restaurants now. Customers love the story behind them, the idea that something beautiful and delicious can emerge from darkness and betrayal. Our servers are trained to tell the tale, appropriately edited for general audiences, of how these desserts represent triumph over adversity. Every time I see someone bite into one of those tartlets and smile, I'm reminded that the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so successful and fulfilling that their attempts to harm you become nothing more than interesting stories you tell at dinner parties. Lena tried to erase me, to steal everything I had worked for, to literally poison my future. Instead, she gave me the motivation to create something better than I ever could have imagined. And that, I think, is the most delicious irony of all. That's my story. How I died and came back to life. How I turned attempted murder into a business strategy. And how I learned that the strongest poison is often the catalyst for the sweetest success. Thanks for joining me on Revenge Treats. Remember, when life gives you poison, make tartlets. And when someone tries to bury you, make sure they know you're the type of person who grows back stronger. Until next time, this is Isadora Velez, reminding you that revenge is a dish best served with perfect presentation and a side of undeniable proof.